This video contains major spoilers for Undertale. Go play the game before watching this. The True Pacifist Ending of Undertale is one of the most popular and well-known endings of Undertale. Generally speaking, it's a good ending that wraps up several of the main issues and with a bit of backtracking resolves most of the major conflicts in the game. But there are multiple secrets that the main cast never find out about and never have a chance to come to terms with. So in this video, I'm going to be going over some things that could improve the True Pacifist Ending, how it could be resolved, and an example of something that was resolved pretty well by extra content. After the Asriel fight, where you learn a lot about him and his past life living with the first human, you can backtrack through the whole game, and when you reach that first bed of golden flowers, the one from the room that you started the game in, you can find Asriel there. If you talk to him, he tells you more about the first fallen human, more about himself and how he died, and his life as a flower. During the genocide route, Flowey appears instead of the monsters who tell you about the death of the first human. Genocide Flowey tells you about how he woke up in the garden, and how he ended up adopting his view of kill or be killed. Pacifist Asriel tells you about how the first fallen human influenced his life as Flowey and how their idealisms were taken to, well, I would say heart, but considering he's soulless, that's beside the point. The point is, Asriel comes to terms with the real truth of the world and with the truth of the behavior of the first fallen human. However, he still feels ashamed of the fact he'll turn into Flowey and scared that he won't be able to stop himself from hurting someone. He refuses to confront his parents and leaves us with an incomplete picture of what he'll do next. That is, until the Undertale alarm clock app was released. There, we learn that Flowey did follow the cast to the surface after they left the underground. It seems that he has retained at least some of his compassion and is trying to live a better life up on the surface. We also learn that he has done this before Asriel regained his compassion, before Frisk fell. When Toriel lived on her own in the ruins, she wouldn't always take care of herself properly. Flowey found her on one such occasion and put a glass of water beside her, just like he did so much later during the party. I'm glad we can see a more compassionate and kind Flowey, even if he doesn't realize it yet. He still puts on his tough guy act, but he's coming to terms with being a flower. It's nice to see his growth, and it puts a neat little bow on his character arc. Well, actually, it's still a bit of a messy bow because he hasn't fully come to terms with it, or tried to tell his parents the truth, but it's possible that could still happen in future alarm clock dialogue or the comics Toby mentioned in the Kickstarter. Personally, I'd like to see a heartwarming comic where Flowey tells Toriel and Asgore, hoping not necessarily for the worst, but definitely not for the best. However, Toriel and Asgore accept him, and we get a moment where Flowey is so overwhelmed at their acceptance and open-mindedness that we see a real display of emotion. During the True Lab portion of the game, you can find a TV with some VHS tapes. The lab entry in that room says, "I ended up snooping around the castle and found these weird tapes. I don't think Asgore's watched them, and I don't think he should." These VHS tapes are conversations from about the era of the first fallen human. The first tape is an innocent one of Toriel and Asgore eagerly awaiting Asriel's birth. The second one is of Asriel asking the first human to do their creepy face, only to realize the lens cap was still on. The third is Asriel trying to prank the human by having them smile for no reason, which segues into the human reminiscing about a pie the two of them made that they accidentally added poisonous buttercups to. The fourth is Asriel crying at some sort of plan the fallen human had suggested, and the fifth and final tape was Asgore telling the human while they were on their deathbed the same words we hear when we die in Undertale, and then Asriel coming in and whispering to the human that he didn't like the plan anymore, and was reassured by the human to trust it. From the story that we can piece together from these tapes, Flowey's monologue in Genocide, the demon's mentioning of a failed plan and being brought back to life in Genocide, the story that the visiting monsters in Asgore's house tell us in Neutral, and Asriel's explanation in Pacifist, this plan not only resulted in both the human and Asriel's deaths, but also the loss of faith in the underground and why Asgore declared war on the humans. The story went like this. The fallen child mentions the poison pie at the end of the third tape. After Asriel recalls the incident, he is asked to turn off the camera. During that time, the human explained their plan: to poison themselves using buttercups so that Asriel could absorb their soul. With a human soul, Asriel would be able to cross the barrier, go to the nearest human village, harvest 6 more souls, gain the power to break the barrier, and return to do so. The next tape is Asriel crying at the devastating plan, but was eventually calmed enough to be willing to go through with it. The final tape is Asgore trying to push the adopted human to survive, and then Asriel comes in and confesses that he didn't want to go through with the plan and needed to be reassured by the dying child. It's important to note that the visiting monsters refer to the human's illness as sudden, as it explains that no monster knows the truth. When the child died, Asriel took their soul. At the end of the True Pacifist route, Asriel tells us that the control over his body was shared with the human. The fallen human picked up their body to bring across the barrier as well. Then, the two of them crossed the barrier and approached the human settlement. When entering the village, the humans were frightened of the monster approaching holding a human's corpse and attacked him ruthlessly. Asriel told us that he had to fight the control of the human who was sharing his soul because they wanted to wipe out the entire village. Asriel returned to the underground without harming any humans. He died near the throne room. The only people who know the true story are Flowey and Alphys. They should tell the main cast the truth, but both of them are too afraid. Flowey is already too scared to tell his parents the truth about the fact that he is Asriel reincarnated, so he likely would be too afraid to tell them the truth of the plan. Alpha struggled with grappling her own mistakes and already decided against revealing the truth to Asgore, so it's unlikely she'll decide to in the future. However, if Flowey or Alphys were to come clean about the plan, it would show considerable growth in their characters, which is always nice to see. It would also give Toriel and Asgore a very important lesson about how they should raise children, because this happened due to their not realizing how much pressure they put on their children and how they were unable to account for a child with mental health concerns. I can't say this revelation would be pleasant, but I do think it would be healthy to see everyone learn and grow from their mistakes by realizing how to do better. I think the best way to see this tied up would be to give us alarm clock dialogue where Toriel and Asgore reflect on where they went wrong after the initial grief from the truth subsides. We could also see Alphys or Flowey's relief at being able to finally open up about the truth. When you meet Papyrus, you learn that his dream is to become a member of the Royal Guard. Sans tells us while we're at Groby's that Papyrus went to the house of the captain of the Royal Guard, Undyne's, in the middle of the night, but Undyne slammed the door in his face because it was, midnight. When she got up the next day, she found out that Papyrus had stayed outside her home all night. Seeing his convictions, she agreed to train him, saying that in the future he could join the guard. Later, when we befriend Undyne, we learn more about her friendship with Papyrus. Undyne tells us that she doesn't think she could ever let Papyrus into the Royal Guard. She thinks he's too nice and innocent, and uses cooking lessons as a way to try and introduce him to other things he could do with his life. Dorkt has a great video on the topic, so I'll link that here. Ultimately, Undyne never reveals the truth to Papyrus and puts a bit of a bad mark on their friendship. I could definitely see this being resolved in post-game content, like in an alarm clock dialogue where Papyrus and Undyne reflect on where she was wrong and she resolves to do better in the future. Here's a great example of a storyline that was tied up well. Mad Dummy is a character who appears as a mini-boss in Waterfall. Initially, they challenge you because they want revenge for how you supposedly treated their cousin, the Ruins Dummy. Eventually, they forget exactly why they're fighting you, but they intend to fight you forever, forever, forever. Well, it would be forever until there's an interruption from acid rain. However, if you go to the dog shrine in the Nintendo Switch version of Undertale after the Mettaton EX fight, you'll be able to find a secret. A life-size anime catgirl doll? If you interact with the doll, it will enter you into a fight with the option to touch the doll. Continuing to touch the doll will eventually trigger it to yell at you and engage you in a fight. The doll declares that we have touched it enough, enough, enough. Familiar. This is the same ghost as Mad Dummy. She says her emotions aren't pure enough and that she needs to fight you and get truly mad to be able to fuse with her new body. She fights you, and in that fight, you can teach her how to feel healthy emotions. However, she only ever appears in the Switch and Xbox versions of Undertale. In the Xbox version, after Mettaton EX is defeated, she gets a job in the dog casino, and there you can learn a bit more about her character. The problem is, she never appears in the PC version, which caused several people to wonder if she was really canon to all versions of the game. However, in the alarm clock dialogue, Mettaton reveals that Mad Mew Mew has in fact come to the surface as Mew Mew, not Mad Dummy, and she's hanging out with the main cast as well. A perfect example of how the extra content after the True Pacifist Ending can wrap up a character storyline in a satisfying way. We all know Mettaton as the robot who wanted to be humanity's star. However, he is a lot more than that. If you buy the mystery key from Caddy and Bratty, then go to Napstablook's house in Waterfall, there's a red house beside Napstablook's. This house is locked, but you can use the mystery key to open it. Inside the house, there are several books arranged on the floor. They turn out to be diaries. The first diary mentioned that Shiren's sister had recently fallen down and that the author had reached out to Shiren to invite her to join a group with themselves and Blookie. The second just says that the author wants to have one diary for each entry, which, honestly, sounds like a waste of material and money, but I digress. The third one says that the author's cousin left to become a training dummy. Then the author says that Blookie was scared the author would try to become corporeal as well, but the author said they would never leave Blookie and that they wouldn't be able to find the body they want anyway. The next diary says that the author created a human fan club and only one person showed up, a nerdy monster obsessed with cartoons. Sounds familiar, don't you think? The author thought that this monster was funny and that they wanted to see her again. The next diary entry just says that their collection is going well. The last diary says that the new monster gave them a surprise, sketches for a body that is exactly what they wanted, a form that would make the author feel like themselves. They decided they would leave with the monster to become a star, but they felt a bit bad that they were leaving Blookie behind. So, to recap, the author of the diaries was close with Blookie. The author became friends with a nerdy monster who, by her description, can only be Alphys. Then Alphys surprised the author with concept sketches for their ideal body. The author decided to leave Blookie behind so that they would be able to follow their dreams. The author can be none other than Mettaton himself. We know that he was created by Alphys, and there was a few occasions where he almost called Napstablook Blookie, but he cut himself off before he could use the old nickname. After the pacifist ending, Mettaton decided to reconnect with Napstablook and Shiren. However, it appears Mettaton hasn't told anyone about his identity in his previous life. When talking to Napstablook after the Asriel fight, they mention they're a big fan of Mettaton, but that's it. They don't say anything like, "I can't believe Mettaton is my cousin," which would have been a completely warranted response if Mettaton had told them the truth. In the alarm clock dialogue, Mettaton mentions that Mew Mew was at the holiday party. She kept trying to pick a fight with him. One of the things Mettaton says is, she had the absolute robotic gall to challenge me to a chainsaw duel. Please, darling, I would never engage in such barbaric activity if it's not being recorded. But still, she escalated the situation, pouring ghost juice into my smile sensors, and it wasn't even a flavor I liked. Haha, not that I know anything about ghost flavors. Now that is one duel I'd pay to see. Anyways, Mettaton is still denying that he ever had a life as a ghost. He is completely lying. Look at his face. Mettaton is clearly uncomfortable and trying to hide his slip-up. If he'd already come clean, he wouldn't have bothered to cover up the statement. Mettaton seems to be ashamed of his past life and the lies he had told his friend. It would be very sweet if we got a comic where Mettaton tells the truth to Blookie and Napstablook accepts its change and helps him tell the truth. Accidentally, because that ghost doesn't realize how great they are. Undertale's True Pacifist Ending is pretty satisfying. However, I personally believe that these additions would close any holes in the characters' arcs and make this ending just a touch more satisfying and truly happy, with the characters no longer living in the shadow of lies and secrets that only we, the player, are aware of. I know these holes would have to be closed outside the game itself to keep the in-game ending shorter, but I think that adding this sort of extra content would give some closure to those of us who are looking for it. I hope we can get some canon information regarding this in the future by way of new alarm clock dialogue, the Kickstarter comics Toby mentioned, or some unfathomable Toby shenanigans that he could use to convey this information to us that helps clear up any issues we see in the characters' relationships and lives. These are just my personal wishes, though. Tell me what you think in the comments. I'll see you next time. Bye!